Welcome to another edition of Carnivore Bites. I'm your host, Jeff Sherman, along with Dr. Eric Lopkin. Again, another eventful week. And I think the biggest story is Iowa. Before we get into more detail, just your overall thoughts, Dr. Lopkin.
Yeah, Iowa's definitely the big story. No Republican has taken more than 50% of the Iowa caucus since I believe it's in at least 25 years. It might even be longer than that. So Trump's standing in that was amazing. And add to the fact that Iowans were dealing with negative 20-degree temperatures. This is a caucus, not a primary, so there are no absentee ballots. You have to show up to be counted, and they showed
Mm-hmm.
up.
Yes, but isn't it, what do you think of the reaction in terms, especially, well, CNN, MSNBC was off the hook with Rachel Nutcase Maddow, basically didn't, not allowing people to see his acceptance speech. I
Yeah,
mean, is that state-run media, or please help me out?
it is. It basically says that CNN and MSNBC are arms of the Democratic Party and cannot be trusted for
And the
independent
deep state,
news.
and the
Yes,
deep state.
and what's really a shame about that is that if you watched Trump's speech, this was the first speech of any political candidate since, I would say, 2019, possibly longer than that, that was actually about reconciliation, about bringing America back together. He actually restrained himself from going after his opponents. Now, of course, in subsequent campaign speeches, of course, he's been going after his opponents. But this
Mm-hmm.
speech was about bringing people together. It was exactly the type of speech that MSNBC and CNN don't want people to believe that Donald Trump is capable of, which is why they didn't air it.
Okay, and also, doesn't it also reflect on how out of touch they are? You had Jake Tapper, a real genius, a Mensa candidate. I'm sure he'll end up at Harvard with the rest of them. But he basically was saying, I'm talking over Mr. Trump now because he's getting into this diatribe, I'm paraphrasing, about immigration, not knowing that that's top on the list in
Right.
red and blue states. It's not,
Immigrant
it's illegal immigration, you genius.
Yeah. Immigration and border security are now the number one issue for both parties. And the fact that the Democratic controlled media does not want to admit that and does not want to cover it shows they're incapable, I think, at this point of getting out of their own echo chamber. They created the echo chambers. We talked about this going back almost 15 years ago. And now they're stuck in their own echo chambers. They can't
I got to
understand that there's
interject
other
something that's
things.
really no. I love what you're saying because not biggest fan, but I think she's an intelligent person. Laura Ingraham had a great point too, dovetailing on yours. Is fascinating that it's like she equated them to a drug addict or an alcoholic. They know what they're doing is killing them. I'm talking about the media, but they can't help themselves. I mean, they know they're losing credibility. They know that no one's watching. They know their viewership is going down the shitter, but they can't help it. Isn't it? I mean, that's a good analogy. They just
It
can't help it.
it's a
And there's
very
go
it's
ahead.
a very good analogy. I think we've hit a point where the political leanings of the people working at these networks have overcome the corporation's desire for ratings and ad revenue. So the people who are on the air, the people who are choosing stories, the people who are editing the stories, they are so gung ho about making sure that they get their point across rather than being independent news people that they're actually overriding the corporation's need to make money.
Okay, but also isn't the degree of mental retardation as well that they're maybe not just all that bright? Don't they know that people get a lot of their information now around the barrier of traditional media, and it makes them look even stupider when people see the speech that they've been blocked from viewing, and they say, "Well, that wasn't too crazy. I kind of agree with that."
Yet the folks that are pushing this narrative are the same folks that worked so hard to cancel people who spoke out about vaccine safety, who disagreed with
Us
DEI.
included.
And yes, we had our own issues with being canceled, and we fought back, and our episodes were reinstated because we were able to say, look, this is what we said, this is the evidence, you're wrong, and they had to back down. But when you're in the echo chamber, it doesn't matter what people are saying outside the echo chamber. They're Even if they are aware of it, they don't care. It's all about pushing their agenda. And they don't seem to understand that the harder they push, what they're actually pushing is people away from them.
Without any question about it. And but doesn't it also go into the whole situation about the unintended consequences of the prosecution's persecutions of Donald J. Trump? Again, we all agree, not the nicest guy. I'm not going to be hanging out with him, having a beer, even though he doesn't drink. The point is, isn't it blowing up?
It really is. The longer these trials go on and the more that comes out about them. I mean, you've got they started with Letitia James in New York, this fraud case where it's the first fraud case in history that there are no victims. And yet New York State is prosecuting. Well, how can you have fraud without any victims? The banks themselves said, no, there was, nothing wrong with this. We did our due diligence. And I mean, what makes it even
Okay, no, wait, let me
more
interject something. The whole thing is so stupid. It's like me saying, my house is worth a half a million. Okay. Now, if someone wants to pay a half a million, that's their business. But most people get an appraiser, genius. I
right?
mean, how can you
And
get
that's the
arrested
key.
for saying I'm going to list my house for $500,000? Okay, if anyone wants to pay it, it's like I'm selling candy and I'm going to sell a candy bar for $20. How if you want to buy it, that's your problem. I mean, you get an appraiser, genius.
That to anybody who has done anything with real estate, if you've bought a house, if you've sold a house, anybody who's gone to a pawn shop to pawn off something, everybody who tries to sell something knows their valuation doesn't matter. It's the appraiser of record. When you work in real estate, the banks do their own appraisal. The realtors do appraisals. When you're trying to sell something to a pawn shop, the pawn shop does the appraisal. You can say what you think it's worth, but in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter what you say. That's the same thing with the Trump organization. The Trump organization can say, yes, we believe that it's worth this because the real estate is worth this much and the branding is worth this much, and they can make a case, but the bank is the one that ultimately decides. Before they give a loan, they decide what the real estate is worth. And legal scholars on both sides of the aisle have been looking at this going, this is going to be reversed. There is almost nothing that this judge has done that can stand up on appeal.
Okay, and let's look at the case in Georgia. I mean, look at the relationship between the DA and the I mean, the thing's a joke.
It is the and again, that's
It's
part of
comical.
the problem is that all of these cases are essentially based on Donald Trump's character. They have very little evidence involved. Um, they're stating things and they're saying, well, Trump said this. They're all based on Trump's character. Well, guess what? If you prosecute somebody based on character, your character better be impeccable. And not one
I
of
love
these
that.
and not
Perfect.
one of
Perfect.
these prosecutors has impeccable character. They are
Uh, Far
politically
from it, genius.
motivated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a joke. I, and then getting back to the Rachel Maddow, I mean, to actually say we're not going to allow you, what thinking person? I'm talking at the receiving end. Well, there's not probably a lot of bright people still watching MSNBC, but who's just going to accept? Okay, I guess I'm not going to be able to watch it. I mean, the arrogance. Like, what are you out of your mind?
Right. I mean, they have the remote. They can change the channel. They have online access. They can go online and see the speech anytime they want.
That's what
Uh,
I'm. Yes,
I mean, it is absolute. I'm amazed of the stupidity
shocked.
involved in this. And I mean, let's face it, we know Rachel Maddow is not a reporter. This was stated in a court of law. She was found not to be a reporter and not to be impartial. So if you're looking for information, she's the last place you would go.
Well, where's the news director? Where's the editor in all this? I mean, who's in charge? Like, what the hell is going on? I mean, is that just because I'm? I mean, the whole thing is unbelievable,
Well,
unbelievable.
Maddow and most major news anchors have the final say over their shows. They have producers that work with them, but they are the editors in chief. They have the final say of the content. And this is true on the networks, on the cable news channels. If you are one of the star anchors, Rachel
Boy,
Maddow, I'm blanking on the Nora
yeah,
O'Donnell,
this is. But let me just interject
Jesse
one thing about that.
Waters.
No, I got that,
You know,
but this is a breaking story. This is not just like this is my opinion. It's like the space shuttle blowing up, and you're saying, no, we're not going to let you watch that because we have other bigger things to fry. It's ridiculous.
it is, but in their world, Trump winning this was not news because
Okay.
everybody knew Trump was going to win. Oh, Trump is making a speech. Oh, well, we can't give him airtime because he's just going to prove how wrong we are. So we can't air that. It's their own self-interest. It's like Fauci. Everything Fauci said was wrong, but he kept doubling down because he couldn't admit that he was wrong.
He was science.
All
It
right,
was
and
science.
he actually said that. He said he was the
Yes.
science. And the fact of the
There's no
matter is,
arrogance involved.
most of what he said was not based in science. He has now testified to that fact that it wasn't based in science. And quite frankly, it was more about funding than anything else. He didn't want his funding questioned, and he didn't want scientists speaking out against these findings because he wanted to control who was getting funding. It was
Yeah,
all
no, it's
about the money.
yeah, without any question. I just think that, again, it's the unintended consequences of all of this, and I guess the real reason we want to discuss this is to kind of close on this issue. Look at Trump. He's gaining with college educated people. Uh, I guess what I'm saying is they're starting to, and also when you protest too much and you have so much of a forbidden fruit, like gambling. When I was a kid, there was like the only Atlantic City was the only place you could gamble. Now, like anywhere, what the hell, you can drive down the street and gamble. It's not as alluring. Don't you think there's a forbidden fruit element as well? Like, what's going on here? I
Oh,
mean, you prevent people from seeing something. They're going to say, "Wait a second, what's this all about?"
absolutely. When I was in high school, we had the football sheets. And every week we'd have a pool and we'd bet on the football games. Now that sports betting is completely legal, at least if you're over 18, I don't know anybody that's actually betting on sports anymore.
Exactly. That's my whole point. Um, and again, how funny was it that Trump gets over 50% in Iowa, and I mean, you talk about like the sky's not blue. According to Rachel Maddow, that was a failure. Although he got more than all the other candidates combined.
Yeah,
Really?
they're saying because
In
he
zero
was
degrees.
yeah, they're claiming that because he is essentially an incumbent, it shouldn't have even been that close. Well, the fact of the matter is he's not an incumbent. And they spent the last 8 years bombarding the American public with lies about him, denigrating him. The fact that he got record numbers is an absolute success for him, no matter what the liberal media
Okay,
says.
what's the bigger picture though? Because I think it has some real legs. I think, and the media is going to get more desperate. They're going to freak out some more. I think this could get really interesting.
It
Not
is
that it already isn't.
it is going to get interesting, and I think the bigger part of this in the minds of the Rachel Maddows, the MSNBCs, the CNNs, is the fact that they don't have faith in Joe Biden. They know Joe Biden can't beat anybody. They won't admit it. But I mean, take a look at the national polls. Joe Biden is losing to every Republican
Every
candidate.
Republican, yes. And wait a second, how about his latest poll numbers? 33%. I mean, 33%. I mean, that's lower than George W. Bush at the lowest point of the Iraq debacle.
He
Not good.
His approval ratings right now are lower than George W. during Iraq. They are lower than Richard Nixon during Watergate. And
Yes.
they keep dropping. Biden was on a campaign stop to Allentown, Pennsylvania. He was visiting small businesses because he's trying to get across the idea that Bidenomics has been good for small business. It hasn't. Um, and he was heckled on the street. This is Allentown, Pennsylvania. This is his backyard. This
Yeah,
is
Scranton
supposed
and Allentown. Yeah,
right. This is
exactly. Close their
supposed to be his
Uncle Joe. Yeah,
base,
Joe Lunchpail. Yep.
and
What
they're
do you mean heckled?
heckling.
Elaborate on that. He was walking down the street
Yeah,
in Allentown, correct?
he was walking down the street and people were yelling at him to go back to Washington. They were calling him a loser. That they were literally calling him names. And
Well,
again,
yeah, he gets no respect. He gets no
yeah,
respect even in the international community when he did his UN address. I think everyone just bolted, right?
yeah,
And the funny thing about it is also talk about appearances that he was in Philadelphia at some kind of let's just say a soup kitchen, whatever, for lack of a better word, and he just rambles in. And no one's even talking. I mean, they didn't yell at him, but he's just like, it was like me walking in there and just, he didn't know what he was doing, loading apples on some kind of. He was just like out in space. I think 33% could be a high water mark. I don't
it
see him really making it to the finish line.
it
It's just
it
getting so bad.
could be his ratings keep dropping. And just to point out to our listeners that yes, what we're saying is not simply Biden bashing. Joe Biden went to Allentown to state that Bidenomics is working for small businesses. And the statistic that he keeps relying on is the fact that small business starts are at an all time high. Well, the fact of the matter is, historically, small business starts are at their highest during recessions. Now, we are not in a recession. But when the economy is good, that's not when small businesses tend to start. Small businesses tend to start when people have been laid off and they see this is their best path forward is
No
starting their
question.
own
Or they see their
business.
economic prospects as becoming more gloomy
Yes.
or gloomier or working for someone else. And that is 100% correct, Dr. Lofkin. You look at some of the biggest entrepreneurial explosions were in some of the worst times, like in the 70s. You got Microsoft, you got Apple, because there was no jobs. There you go.
There were no jobs. There were no jobs. Excuse me. Corporations in negative economic conditions tend to close ranks. They're hesitant to spend money, they're hesitant to hire, and that creates opportunity for small businesses. And entrepreneurs take advantage of that. So the fact that entrepreneurs are seeing those opportunities now is not a sign that Bidenomics is working. Quite the contrary. It is a sign that the economy is teetering.
No question about it. Or the people have to start, let's say, ancillary businesses just to make ends meet. I mean, you look at people are raiding their 401ks. It's not because they want to go on vacations because they can't afford living day to day. And talk about being tone deaf. Bidenomics, like who's the Harvard genius, the 33-year-old Harvard genius in the administration that thought that was a good idea? Obviously, maybe not the brightest bulb in the Christmas tree, but speaking of not the brightest bulb of the Christmas tree, you also have Lloyd Austin, our esteemed Secretary of Defense. Um, yeah, missing for 2 weeks, and our president doesn't know. Really?
The president didn't know, the cabinet didn't know, his own assistants did not know. And
I mean,
now,
and we're talking about a time when we're under attack from Hutus from Yemen,
yeah,
sponsored by Iran,
we
obviously.
we
And
have we have gone into combat. We have had 3 attacks against Houthi targets with Austin MIA. So we have had a
and the
very
president
active.
MIA.
Yeah, well,
Because how? No, no. Do this.
the
No,
president's
do the
been MIA
scenario.
since he was
I
elected.
no, I understand that, but like a real presidency, we're under attack. It'd probably be a daily meeting of what a situation analysis. But this
There,
guy's probably got his diapers, eating ice cream, and shitting in his pants. There you go.
and you're talking about Biden being MIA. The New York Post actually took a look at the time he has spent on vacation, and he has spent 31% of his presidency on vacation. Now he's starting to campaign. So now you've got 31% of his time on vacation and another, let's say, 30-40% of his time on the campaign trail. When is he doing his job?
Well, he's not, and that's
No.
probably for the good of all of us. But here's what I think, and I want your opinion on this. I believe the more the time, how do you like this equation? Time on the trail is inversely related to the effectiveness and his approval rating. The more people see, the more they get scared shitless.
Oh yeah, because
Any thoughts?
the more he's on the trail, the more
That's what I'm
people
saying. Yes.
see that he is not capable. They see him being led off of stages after a speech goes off the rails. He'll get a good 10, maybe 15 minutes into a speech.
Maybe that's
And
pushing it.
yeah, and then he starts rambling, and then they come on the stage and they lead him off. And that does not inspire confidence in him. That is one of
Well,
the reasons that even though he's got a 33% approval rating, only 27% of Americans think he's mentally capable of doing the job. So even some of those that approve of him don't think he's capable of doing the job.
now, let me ask you another question on that issue, because the only thing he's really campaigning about, or his only real spearhead, is MAGA. Even in Valley Forge, right outside of Philadelphia. Hold on for a second. He was MAGA, MAGA, MAGA. And by the way, he called himself George Washington, not on purpose, by mistake. And he has this, speech, and then he's let off Like basically, I heard this from who Gutfeld said this is hysterical. They should have played the theme from Visiting Angels as he's walking, not hail to the chief. So the point is, how effective is this MAGA shit? I don't think it has any
Not
resilience
it.
or residency at all.
Oh, it does have some, but only to the echo chamber. The folks who are not going to vote for anybody but Biden anyway, they're cheering that on. But on the other side, Biden's constant banging on the MAGA drum is why Donald Trump got the majority of votes and beat everybody else in Iowa, because the
Combined.
American people listen to this and they go, wait a minute, he's not attacking Donald Trump. He's attacking the voters. He's attacking the people who believe in the same things, who are looking at what the liberals have done to America and saying, no, this is not good. It is having the exact same effect as Hillary Clinton's basket of deplorables comment did.
100%. You think they would
Except
learn? No, wait.
Biden,
You think the hold on? But you think the Harvard grads, the geniuses of the world, would kind of learn from that mistake? Hello, really,
they
really?
never learn from their mistakes, but they're compounding it, because Hillary Clinton only made the basket of deplorables mistake once, and it pretty much turned the tide against her.
Yes, it did. No questions.
Biden keeps saying it. He keeps hammering away on it. And the more he does, the more angry his opponents get. It is having the exact same effect as the Palestinian protests. The more the pro Hamas protests go on, the more violent they get and the more they disrupt people's lives, the higher the approval rating is for Israel's actions.
Is
And
that true?
yes, we've seen that in the polls. More and more people are supporting Israel. And of course, again, you won't hear that on the left wing media because it doesn't go along with the oppressor storyline. But the more these Palestinian protests are going on, the more people are saying, you know what? No, Israel is right.
You know something? You have a very good point. I never really thought about this, but just give this a little due diligence, if you will. That people think, okay, they're caught up in their lives, and yeah, Israel, Palestine, they all kind of mixed together. And then when they look at the news, even though the intent of the news broadcast is to show the or demonstrate the oppression of Israel, repression of Israel, they're thinking, gee, wait a second. I see these Israeli pros. Everything kind of looks cool. And then you see these friggin' nutcases out there blocking traffic, becoming violent. They're going, wait a second. If I was Israel, what the hell? You're surrounded by these shitheads. I might do the same thing. Any
Exact
validity in that?
Absolutely. People are seeing that the pro Israel protests have all been peaceful. They have not gotten violent at all. And in fact, most of them are people holding hands and singing. Whereas the pro Hamas protests, they get violent. They attack onlookers. They challenge people. They have to prove their point. Well, that's
Plus,
because
their
they
messaging is not where we have a point here, blah, blah. No, it's from the river to the sea. You're talking about exterminating a group of people, in this case, the Jews.
all right, and that's the other thing is they are literally chanting from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Well, if you're smart enough to look at a map and see what from the river to the sea means, it means the eradication of Israel, not the
There
freedom
you
of
go.
Palestinian people. And the more they chant this, the more violent they get, the more people who, quite frankly, before didn't have a dog in the race,
Didn't really give a
now,
shit, quite
right,
frankly.
didn't care when this doesn't affect me. Now they're going, well, these people are, they're in my way. They're keeping me from getting to work. They're interrupting what's going on in my life.
And they're
How
unappealing. And they're
Yes,
unappealing.
and
I'm not just
how
talking
much can
physically. They look like a bunch of thugs. There you go.
And if you want to see what a real pro-Israeli protest looks like, go to YouTube and type in Am Yisrael Chai. That's Chai. Am Yisrael Chai is a song. And you have people around the world gathering in choruses singing this song. And it is a song of joy, it is a song of victory. And they're all peaceful, they're all about getting together. And in fact, the signs you see at these pro Israel protests have signs of Palestinians and Israelis holding hands because that's what their goal is.
Seems like the goals are pretty much diametrically opposed. But I think it's really interesting that as this goes on, Biden's response, because there was going to be a massive walkout to protest his so-called pro-Israeli stance, that he called a snow day yesterday,
Yeah, he called
so
this
they wouldn't. Yes,
he called the snow day, which I found amusing because what most people don't realize is that a government walkout at this point is completely irrelevant because, like corporate America, our government agencies are primarily being run remotely now. People are working at home, they're not in the office to walk out.
yeah, but it was also to cover his ass because
Yeah.
it's embarrassing. And the only thing that Boy Genius could think was a snow day in Washington would it have like a half an inch, but pretty interesting. And speaking
Well,
of the campaign,
they did have snow and ice, but quite frankly, there was a better option for him. He could say point blank, if you walk out, don't come back because you won't have a job.
he is so weak he cannot upset anyone of his base. The nutcases, which are basically as people. Here's what I think. How do you like this theory? Is more sane people blow out of here, and you even look at the New York Times, the migration of college-educated people to the Trump side of things. What he's left with is the whack jobs, the nutcases, and the uneducated. The party of science. There you go.
Yeah, I mean, Fauci blew any chance of them being the party of science. But yeah, the more people are actually looking into things and finding the truth, they're not relying on mainstream media anymore. They're getting, because now you can go to local newspapers online and get news from where it's actually happening. You can get different points of view. You can look at international media. You can listen to podcasts. And quite frankly, mainstream media over the past 20 years has had such a downsizing of talented journalists
Oh,
that
please.
they are now doing their investigations in podcasts and on sites like Substack. So you can get real in-depth investigations that are proving what the mainstream media is saying isn't true by going online. You have to look for it, but they're finding it. And when you're educated, when you're truly educated, not just getting a degree from Harvard uh, in lesbian studies and DEI,
There you go.
then you know how to find these things. You know how to do the research.
Well, speaking of that, just as an aside, you have to laugh because we talked about. I want to get the whole thing about it, but looking at people, smart people, young people, really trying to build a career, looking at a buffet of skills and getting certificates and everything, and then, I mean, if you're a serious business person and someone shows up from a degree from Harvard, a $250,000 degree in art studies, I mean, you got to shake your head. You got to say,
Well,
like, really? Are
it's
you
not
kidding
it's
me?
not even just the folks with degrees in art studies. There was an article in the Wall Street Journal talking about the fact that MBAs cannot get hired. One, because the MBA degree is no longer relevant. It was basically relevant for about 8 years
80s.
in the 80s. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
But now people are going to Harvard and Yale and, MI and getting their business degrees from these, prestigious schools who now are not held in prestige. And folks are going, no, I know that I'm going to have to retrain them. I'm going to have to spend a fortune telling them that no, what you learned is irrelevant. And worse, we have a generation of people entering the workforce, having been in the workforce now for about 10 years, who grew up getting awards for participating, who believe they know everything and they don't have any more to learn. And why aren't you doing it their way? And businesses, there was a lot of talk for a lot of years about how businesses are going to have to adapt to their needs. And as
Yeah,
it
I don't think
turns
so.
out, they didn't. They went, you know what? We are not hiring you. And they actually brought back baby boomers into the
Oh yeah,
workforce.
no, it's really funny. It used to be 55 plus. Check, please. No, check, please. Now, just for expediency, it's not because they're it's not something for charity. You hire a baby boomer, and guess what? You're going to get some work done. Hire
That's
these,
it.
wallflowers. You're going to get shit done. And by the way, I had a really good, smart friend. He worked and he still does, in the ad agencies in New York. And I love what he said. He goes, beware of the unintended consequences of an MBA. And he's so
Oh,
right. There's a
yes.
company I worked for, Stanley Black and Decker, and the geniuses of geniuses, all the MBAs, effed up brands that you'd have to try. Stanley, others, okay? Black and Decker. You'd have to try to score, but everything was, instead of looking at any kind of inspiration, something like, hey, let's run with this. It was all, by the time they were, no emotion, no energy, and what you have is a bunch of people doing pivot charts on an Excel spreadsheet. Oh boy,
Yeah, that's the big problem with the MBA is you are taught to live and die by the numbers. And
there you go,
everybody
perfect.
everybody has heard the phrase the numbers tell the whole story. But
No,
when
they don't.
you're in business, no, the numbers tell the whole story. But that story could be fiction.
Yeah, the
And
number, you can make the
no,
numbers look, you say whatever you
yes.
want, but and the other thing is, no, most of the situations or most of the real home runs, and of course there was market research involved, but hey, I got a great idea. By the time an MBA panel is done with that bright idea, it's in a trash heap.
Yes.
There you go.
Innovation does not tend to survive the MBA process.
No,
And
no, no,
innovation is what drives the American economy. That and
did.
we were talking about how businesses are bringing back baby boomers in because baby boomers have a work ethic. There was a
Hmm.
TikTok influencer who was working and they made news because on their TikTok account, they were complaining that, they couldn't handle working 9 to 5. It's too exhausting. They just don't have it in them. And, they don't know what they're going to do if they keep having to work 9 to 5. Well, long long story short, several months after this video went viral, she was fired from her job.
Good, but good riddance. It's
Yes.
very interesting, and it doesn't bode well. I looked at a show. It was on cars. How do you like this? And they had Kaiser. I don't know where he was from. You're American, right? He built all the ships, during the war. He actually started Kaiser Permanente, which was the precursor for HMOs. The guy was brilliant. This guy didn't worry about. He was probably working, and he was probably into his 70s where I was still working, probably 15 hours a day. There you go. I think we've kind of lost that, didn't we?
We have,
And
and
he didn't have an MBA, by the way. He had no MBA. Just want to
that
break it to you.
and that is something else that is drawing people to Trump. Take a look at the schedule that Donald Trump has been keeping for the last 3 or 4 months. He is going to court. He is spending the days in court there in person. He doesn't have to be. His lawyers can do it for him. But he is in court. He is then leaving court and doing campaign stops. He barnstormed Iowa like nobody's business. The only one that actually made more campaign stops than he did was
Vic.
DeSantis, and DeSantis came in second. And people are looking at it going, wow, he's doing all of this. He's on the go. Then you, by comparison, look at Biden. Biden is taking 3-day weekends. He doesn't have anything on his schedule earlier than 9:30.
Nothing.
He finishes his day by 4:30. And they look at me like, well, wait a minute. And they're not that far apart in age.
No, they're not. No, by the way, it's not an age thing, okay? Pierce Morgan said this. He was at a soccer match and Mick Jagger was there, and Mick Jagger's 80, same age as Biden. And he just talked about the difference. It has nothing to do with rock stars. It was like he's laughing, he's goofing, he's got a whole tour plan. Biden, you'd sit next to him, he'd probably be drooling. And again, I
Yeah.
want to harp on something, but then let's talk about this whole thing. I really do believe these persecutions and prosecutions are helping Trump because people see when they get out of the court, they see these let's just say, lack of A+ talent on the other side. I'm not talking politically. I'm talking the prosecutors, the DAs. These people are idiots, okay? And then you see Trump after the court hearing. He's got the American flags behind him, and he's articulate. He's on message, and you're going, "What the hell is going on?" Letitia and all these people are idiots. The
That's
judge, the cab driver judge. I mean, are you effing kidding me? It's a
That's it.
joke.
You are seeing the energy he brings. You are seeing the fact that
And the intelligence.
yeah, that he is coherent. And again, you said it's got nothing to do with age, and that's absolutely true. Because you know who else is 80? Joe Lieberman, who's pushing no labels. He is the same age as Joe Biden, and
Oh, God.
you put these two in a room, you would think Joe Lieberman is at least 10 to 15 years younger than Biden.
Yeah, there's no question. Age is age. Age is obviously a real factor in life, but sometimes with age comes wisdom. If you never had wisdom, you ain't going to catch that train.
Yeah.
Speaking of no labels, we have Chris Christie has been kicked around in terms of maybe a possibility of joining no labels, and we also have Manchin. Manchin, I was not impressed. He was on a Sunday morning show, and I'm not so sure the guy's the brightest bulb in the Christmas tree. Anyway, to be hoodwinked by Biden and Chucky Schumer, it's not exactly men's a candidate material. And he says he's going to wait for March, and even the moderator, March, like, what do you, like, really, March? Like, it's like 3 months away from the friggin' conventions. Hello, genius. I think he
Well,
would be a disaster.
That's
I'm
that's
not I'm not big
actually
on
the
him at all.
that's actually the point, and it's not just mentioned. No labels themselves, while they're trying to get onto all of the ballots right now, they have stated they only want to run a candidate if it turns out that the race is going to be Biden versus Trump. And if Nikki Haley pulls off a miracle and actually becomes the
Miracle.
candidate, no labels will stand down. Now, I've heard people talking about Chris Christie. The only thing is, I haven't heard anybody from No Labels mention his name. Apparently, they have not had any real talks with him. They have had talks with Manchin. Manchin has been in active talks with No Labels, but I don't think No Labels would even look at Chris Christie, especially
How can you
after the
miss him?
way, well, after the way he went off the rails in his speech pulling out of the race.
I would agree with that. I think politically he's finished. It's really funny that it's time. You get older, time becomes quicker and quicker. 10 years ago he was a rock star. No longer. I think he's going on one of those cruises with the retread rock stars. Yeah,
Yeah,
I don't think he really has
and
too much of a future.
no,
And I
and
also
you
think
have to
that.
remember
Go ahead.
also that what Christie did, his whole race for president was all
Anti-Trump.
anti-Trump, no labels. And for those of you who are still not familiar with No Labels, you really should look into the organization because they've been around for almost 20 years now. People just started hearing about them like last year. But their entire platform is unification. It's let's get along and get things done for America. They are the ones that put together the Problem Solvers Caucus of bipartisan Republicans and Democrats working together in Congress to get things done. They have always been about working together. And Chris Christie basically just shot that message in the foot, so he doesn't stand a chance of being chosen by them.
100% agree. I do think that if you do the analysis, I think no matter, even if it's Nikki Haley, I still think it hurts Biden more than Trump. Trump's got a solidified base. Biden has no base.
Yeah, there.
Zippo.
Biden has a large segment of his voters that are only voting for him to keep Trump out of office. If No Labels runs Joe Manchin as a candidate, you will see Democratic leaning independents vote for Manchin. You will see Democrats who are anti Trump but know that Biden is not capable of doing the job. They will vote for Manchin. It is going to be a big drain on Biden's votes.
I actually think this: if in fact a Manchin or someone of decent caliber is brought into the fray for No Labels, I believe Biden gets replaced because then it becomes insurmountable for this guy. I think it's a huge problem, and I do think what you brought up when it was we prepped for the podcast is the water, the atmosphere has never been better. What 43% of people polled now identify themselves as independent. 27% of Democrats.
Yeah, a new Gallup poll came out showing that 43% of Americans now identify as independent, which is tying the record. It hasn't been that high since 2014. By the same token, 27% identify as Democrats. That's also a record, but a record low. It hasn't been that low since 1991. So
Yeah,
you are,
right at the end of the Reagan Revolution, where the Democrats were at their lowest ebb.
yes,
That's a fact.
and you are seeing now that more of those independents lean Republican than lean Democrat. This has not happened in a long time. And the simple fact of the matter is, if the Democrats had not swung so far to the left, this would not have happened. I have heard
You know, wait, can I
Democrats.
interject one thing? I got to interject one thing. I think the death knell of the Democratic Party was Bernie Sanders. Couldn't happen to a nicer son of a bitch, but
Yeah,
that is
he
true.
he has killed the Democratic
Destroyed
Party
it.
because I have heard Democrat after Democrat say this, and Bill Maher has repeated it over and over again. But it's more than him. It is a lot of Democrats saying, I did not leave the party left me. And
And
you,
one of the bigger reasons for that is the quintessential self-hating Jew, Sanders.
it's
It was all
Sanders,
funny at
it's
first,
it's Sanders,
AOC.
it's the squad, it is,
He's the one
oh,
who laid the groundwork. He definitely did.
yeah, it is. Well, I don't know about laying the groundwork.
He was a forerunner. He was
I
a forerunner
I
of
think
the
he took
nutcase.
it. I think he took advantage of the movement. I think it was Obama that laid the groundwork.
Good point. Good point. I stand corrected. Good point. Yes. Very, very true. Now, speaking of, basically policies and misguided policies and policies that actually hurt America and American jobs is the Biden administration's EV policy. And the EV policy now is into a deep freeze because people were stuck because, surprise, surprise, genius, they don't work that well in a deep freeze.
Not even that well. It's not just the EVs themselves. The chargers also
Chargers,
don't
yeah.
well in cold weather. And in fact, Tesla chargers all around Chicago and the surrounding areas were described as Tesla graveyards over the past several days because cars would just die there. They could not handle a charge. If you could get a charge, it took hours to charge the batteries, and these were rapid chargers. So now the entire environmental push of the Biden administration is taking yet another hit. And his green agenda has taken hit after hit after hit in
It's not
recent
his, but
months
anyway, yeah.
because not that long ago, they were also pushing offshore wind farms. Well,
Hmm.
some of the biggest wind projects have been canceled because thanks to Bidenomics, those wind farm projects are no longer capable of being profitable. So the power companies have pulled out of them. So
Surprise, surprise.
his
And also, it's a
own
very interesting as
policies
well.
killed his own policies are
Well,
working against him.
probably the only good thing from his policies. But also, it's even people don't want these. It's almost like the collective government of Russia, Soviet Union, a la 1970s. People don't want. Some people want them. The majority of people really don't want EVs. Not at this point, maybe in the future. You can't force people to do these things. They're forcing actually trucks to convert to EV. I mean, it's a catastrophe. These people are all theoretical morons.
Yeah,
They've
it
never
is.
been in the real world. I worked at a gas station. How do you like that when I was in high school? I knew that batteries don't do as well in the cold.
Yes.
Oh, really? Genius.
No,
Yeah. God.
I find it
God.
amazing. The state of Connecticut, not a generally warm state in the winter, has just gotten a federal grant to buy electric school buses. Guess what? These
Nice.
kids are going to be going back to remote learning in the winter when those buses can't run in the snow and cold. So,
Okay, diesel buses have a big enough problem, and that's one of the reasons why the schools have delays. Is not just because of everyone think, oh, it's the snow. No, it's not always the snow.
no,
It's because if it's
it's to
below
get the
zero,
buses
they can't
moving.
start the buses. You can't,
Yes.
and an EV. Oh God, yoy, yoy, yoy.
And
Anyway, but
in
carbon
terms
carry is. Go ahead.
in terms of
Car,
EVs, I do believe EVs will eventually take over,
without a doubt.
but it's not going to be these battery powered EVs. I think the battery powered EVs that we are seeing now that the administration is pushing, they are going to go the way of the compact fluorescent bulb. And what you are going to see is the surge of hydrogen fuel cells because hydrogen fuel cells, one, only take a minute or two to fill up. Hydrogen is one of the most abundant elements on the planet, so we don't have to rely
There you
on
go.
China for the elements. And they run absolutely clean. You don't have the environmental impact of the mining for the batteries, the creation of the EVs, which, quite frankly, the manufacture of EVs is more damaging to the environment than running a gas guzzling car.
Okay, but wait a second. Aren't these hydrogen cells, which have been bantered about for years, and I agree with you, are probably a better alternative, but isn't going to blow up the whole cottage industry of the green cottage industry led by Carbon Carry? You know
Oh,
that
yes.
he, as he junkets around the world in his private jet, he's just starting to disclose the kind of empire that he's sitting on. The average salary of the people in his enclave is 170,000.
Yes.
That's a lot of money.
Yes, he is flying around. I saw clips today where he testified in front of Congress saying, well, it's a lie. I've never owned a private jet. I don't own a
What?
private jet. Well, no,
His
if you
wife.
look right, if you look into it, no, he doesn't own it. His wife owns it.
You
It's
know
like,
something? He's the biggest cat ever. Another guy who hasn't worked a day in his life, and he's in love with Teresa Carey, I think her name is. I went to the moon. Yeah, they're totally like digging each other. There you go.
but now
But he's a
he
great.
is leaving.
He's
He is leaving
what?
his Kerry is leaving his position as climate czar,
Oh, shucks.
to join the Biden reelection campaign. So
Oh,
so right now, the Biden reelection campaign's two biggest surrogates are John Kerry and Hillary Clinton. What did they have in common? They both
losers.
lost. Yes.
Yes, and Kerry, by the way, lost to George W. You got
Right.
to really try to do that. He has the charisma of mayonnaise. And by the way, I have to give myself credit. Carbon Kerry is
That,
a Jeffrey Sherman
that,
creation. Thank you very much. And we'll close on bullshit walk at, bullshit talks money, well, money talks bullshit walks, whatever, or vice versa. You have walking a 5 million person exodus from blue states to red. That's called walking, voting with your feet, I think they call that.
yeah, the blue state policies have been an abject failure. They
Disaster.
have been a disaster for crime rates. They have been a disaster for businesses. They have been a disaster because now that people know they can work remotely, they don't want to live in these cities anymore under these
Why
liberal
would you?
laws. Exactly. So I personally know folks who have left New York City that I never thought would leave New York City. And they finally said, enough is enough. We have to get out.
I
And
don't think New York City will ever be the same. How do you like that?
well,
Economically, there's a real no economic reason for it. A lot of big cities will never be the
yeah,
same. Philadelphia, all the because of technology.
yeah,
I bet you the occupancy, of course.
yeah, San
What's the
Francisco,
point?
Los Angeles, they are in a death spiral right now. And part of the reason is that these liberal policies forget the policies themselves, but to implement the policies are expensive. And to make the money to run these policies, they relied on taxing businesses. Well, guess what? Businesses are leaving. Apple, Apple, who so proudly has on every one of their products designed in California,
hmm
is now moving employees to Texas. They are shutting down offices in San Diego to move people to Texas. They have started, companies have put corporate headquarters in Austin. Tesla has moved people out of California. All of these businesses are moving people out because they don't have to have them there. And quite frankly, there have been numerous cases where folks have said, we are moving our headquarters because it is not safe for people to come to work here.
McDonald's moved out of Chicago. They've been
Right.
there since their
Since they
inception, and it's just
started.
like, yeah, there you go. Well, the year's been so far so good, Dr. Lopkin. A lot of good dialogue, good interaction. I hope it continues for the rest of 24, and our listeners can be a part of what we're doing, can't they?
Absolutely. You can go to our Facebook page, Carnivore Radio. Let us know what you're thinking. You can also go to xvadio.com/connect. Let us know your thoughts. What's on your mind? We want to hear it. And of course, you can catch every episode of Carnivore Bites at xvadio.com, the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, Amazon Music, and other platforms that respect freedom of speech.
I thank you, Dr. Lopkin. We'll be back next week.
We'll see you then.